If you make videos, making them interesting should be one of your main goals. But how do you do that? If you think back to kindergarten, show and tell was probably one of the most exciting days in class because people got to show you really cool things and then tell you all about them. My name is Tom, this is The Enthusiasm Project, and today I'm gonna show and tell you all about how I film my B-roll footage for my videos. And when I say B-roll footage, I don't necessarily mean like cinematic slow motion B-roll montages, which are very fun, but sort of like a different genre. I'm talking specifically about literally, showing your audience what you're talking about. So for example, if I'm doing a camera review, I'm going to talk about that camera, and if I mention that the controls are laid out in a certain way, it makes sense to then show an image of the controls of that camera. That's kind of the most simple, concrete, nuts and bolts way to think about how to incorporate B-roll footage. But great B-roll like that also just keeps your audience interested. No matter how beautiful you might be or how perfect your main shot might be, if someone's just staring at you talking for 5, 10, 15, 20 minutes or more, however long your video is, their mind might start wandering a little bit and their thoughts might start drifting. So those visual changes are cues that can keep your viewer engaged. So when I'm doing that camera review and I'm talking about specific features, I'm definitely gonna show clips that demonstrate exactly what I'm talking about. But to keep the audience interested and engaged, I'm also going to just show clips of the camera while I'm talking, just sort of product beauty shots. And how to film those, I think, is really, really fun. And it's a great chance to be experimental. And so today I want to pull back the curtain and let you know exactly my strategy for getting my B-roll shots and how I put those together. I will say the first thing that I normally do is film this part of a video, film the talking head part, because that is the foundation to build off of. And then oftentimes when I'm filming my B-roll footage, I will play this footage back so I can hear me talking about whatever it is that I'm featuring in that video, and then I can know even more exactly which shots I need to get. For today, we're just gonna do a mock photo shoot using this 3D printer because it's a really fun thing to film. It moves, it's colorful, and it looks really cool under dramatic lighting. So this is gonna be our product that we use for today's B-roll. Before I actually start filming B-roll, one of the things that it took me a while to learn was that just because the room is set up to look good when I'm sitting down talking to the camera, it doesn't always look good for B-roll. So right now, if I put the printer on the table and I get my camera and I start filming, it's not that the shot is bad, but it's very bright, it's super high key light, and there's this white chair in the background. So I always start thinking about my background. First thing I usually do is remove the chair, so that way now I have a lot of depth between my subject and my background. And adding depth to your subject is one of the best things you can do. In this room, the desk is about 8 feet away from the wall, which is a great distance for giving depth to the background. It blurs out the background, especially because I pretty much film all my B-roll with the Sigma 24mm 1.4. That's like the lens I use for pretty much everything. But adding space between a background and your subject as much as possible is really important. Even if you're just doing a solid color, you just put up a white sheet or a black sheet or something and you want that as your background, if you pull your object or your subject, whether it's a person or a thing, further away from it, it's going to help blur this out and make it more of a solid, consistent color or image, and then this is gonna really pop out. And that's kind of what I do here, which is the reason I always film B-roll facing this direction, because it's the blue wall. Behind me is just the white closet doors, which are great light reflectors, but not so great as a background for B-roll. I love to experiment with my B-roll, especially with lighting, so I push my microphone out of the way since audio doesn't really matter in this case normally. And then the first thing that I'll do is move my light. If you saw my C-stand video, you kind of saw how I do this, but basically I just extend the light over and out and raise it up. This is just my preference. It's not the only way to do it, but I really love, for product photography in general, a very nice soft overhead light. And so I usually place this over the product. This is the Falconize RX18. It's only on at 85% right now. That's usually what I have it at to film me, and it lights up the whole room. I usually turn it down. Sometimes this is only 5%, maybe 10%. But I have found that's usually enough, and then my shot starts looking a lot more dynamic. The background becomes a little darker and moody, and the product really starts to pop out. And the soft light from the top gives nice shadows and highlights, but it doesn't give any harsh shadows and highlights. And then the other lighting that I play with are more accent lights. So I've talked about these before. These are small little, this is a little aperture light. This is a little Godox light. They're just small, little inexpensive lights that I usually hide places. These are great for adding accents on products. I usually lay them down and have them face up, and it gives some nice low highlights on the bottom. So this is the basic setup. Before we're ready to start filming though, it's important to remember we want things to look visually appealing. It's always a good idea if you're doing any kind of product photography to just dust things off and clean them up as best you can. Sometimes even a can of air can be really helpful. And once you have that all set, now you can start framing up your shots. In general, for product photography, I like to keep the camera low because it makes the product look big and larger than life. If I'm filming up here looking down, it's going to be really small. But if I get the camera down at the product's eye level, then what I end up with is this much more visually appealing, epic looking shot. In terms of my camera settings, this is the 6D Mark II, but usually I will be using the EOS R for my B-roll footage with the Sigma 24 1.4. Sometimes I'll switch out lenses, but very, very rarely. And then I try to keep the ISO as low as possible. Usually I keep my ISO at 100 and aperture just full wide open at 1.4. I know there are some people who kind of criticize always using a super shallow depth of field, but I don't care. I really like it. I used camcorders for way too long, and so having a nice shallow depth of field, I love it. And then I always have my camera on a tripod head mounted to a slider on my tripod. Some of the choices you make for your B-roll footage are going to be purely based on visuals. Right now I chose to use purple filament because I really like the way that it looks in this shot, and I really like the way that it looks when it reflects the light from above. So this could have been any color, but the purple accent adds a pop. And it's important to remember as you're filming things in the background. I have my notes and stuff over here, but you can't see those in the shot. This shot is nice and clean. I've got my blue wall behind it. Everything looks really good. I'm gonna double check my focus. Usually I stick with autofocus because the camera's moving and that way it'll lock on. Sometimes you need to use manual focus. And then pretty much what I'll do is I'll just get a variety of shots. You might want to just do a nice slow pan. All of your shots should be really slow and smooth usually, unless you're trying to go for a specific effect. Sometimes if you're introducing a product, a really slow tilt down is a great way to introduce it. But of course, one of my favorite things to do is to use the slider, and then I'll have the slider move, and I usually just turn the camera really slowly. And the reason I like that is because it adds so much visual interest. We're not just seeing the product, but we're seeing the background kind of move. There's this parallax effect going on, which I think looks really good. And you're also seeing the product from different angles. You also want to get, close-up shots. So sometimes I like to put the slider where it's just going to come over the edge of the table here. And now, for example, if I'm making a video about this 3D printer, I'm definitely going to be talking about the motors. So I know I'll need a shot of the motors, and I can have the camera push in to one of the motors. Now I kind of wish I were making a video about this 3D printer because this is looking really cool. So as I mentioned, this is a great chance to be experimental, but the most important thing is to show your viewers what they want to see and what they need to see. There are certain parts of products that if you're reviewing them or you're talking about them, it's very important to show. And then once you have everything you need, then you can start really playing around and being experimental. This shot right here of the printer's motor looks really good with this soft light. If I turn off the light, it doesn't necessarily look as good, but it could probably look better. I'm gonna dim the light a little bit. This is actually only at 1%. This is such a bright light. And then I'm gonna take one of these accent lights and place it below the motor. And it's not that that changed the shot entirely, but now the highlights are different. The lighting is a little different. It's a little moodier. It's one of those things people are probably not gonna notice consciously, but subconsciously they probably will notice it. What I might even do sometimes is actually physically move a light around, and then you can kind of play with shadows, and that looks really cool. If your shot is moving and your light is changing, I do that a lot when I do camera lens reviews, is I take a light and I shine it towards the front of the lens, because even right here on this camera, if I just point it here, it's just the lens is just like a dark hole, but as soon as you add a light to the front of it, you can see that it starts to reflect that light back. So there's a lot of ways to use light to make things more visually appealing. Another one of my favorite things to do is to play with lighting from behind the subject. So I have a battery powered light here. I'm gonna try to either position it out of frame or where it's hidden behind the printer. And then it's also giving me a nice streak of light here, a nice highlight. The fact that I can see the light through there, it doesn't really matter. I could reposition it, I could move things around a little bit, but I think this looks great as is. And the more that you can add life to your subject, the better. So depending on what you're filming, it might actually have some movement or some life of its own. If whatever you're filming doesn't move on its own, you can add life to it. Just simple things like if I turn the printer on and you see my hand come out of the frame and then the screen turn on, that gives it some life and some interest. If you see my hands go through and start playing with some of the buttons, then that also makes it interesting. I'm gonna get the printer started printing, so I apologize if there's noise. I've actually been using my printers to print face shields for doctors and nurses and things who are running out of protective equipment. So I'll print one of those right now, and that way the printer will be moving and it'll be more fun and interesting to film. Now that the printer's moving, I can try to follow some of the action. It's like filming sports, but it's nothing like filming sports. And when I am filming, I usually film for at least 10 seconds of good footage. So not setup, not finding my framing or focus, but once focus is locked in, once I have the framing how I like it, getting 10 seconds of really usable footage for every shot is going to make your life a lot easier. It's also a great idea to film way more than you need. You don't want to find yourself editing and realizing you don't have enough footage. It's a much better idea to go, oh man, I have way too much footage and I'm not going to be able to use all the shots that I want to use. And sometimes, depending on what you're filming, playing around with the surface that you're filming on can be kind of cool. This is just a wood table. I like the wood look, so I use it a lot, but sometimes it's too bright or it's too orange, or I just want something else. So finding materials, whether it's paper or poster board. I have this black glass computer monitor stand that I got for like $15 online. I wouldn't always recommend moving a 3D printer while it's printing, but that's what I'm gonna do right now. I mentioned keeping the surface clean. This is glass, and when I'm not using it, it's dusty and I was just touching it, so I wanna make sure to wipe it down, make it nice and clean and shiny. Did you guys hear about the bee that kept bumping the camera when he was filming his footage? Yeah, it was a lot of bumblebee roll. Bumblebee roll, because they bumbled like a bumblebee. Yep, there we go. And I really love the way this purple filament looks on this black. So this is a cool setup. You can always do rack focuses where you're focused on one part of your subject, and then you can either manually focus or tap to focus and have the camera shift to the others. That way you're controlling the audience's attention and what they're looking at. When you're filming your B-roll footage is a great time to also think about your thumbnail for your video, because lots of times you'll have cool lighting set up, you'll have these cool camera angles, and you'll see something that looks great. That's a good time to switch your camera into photo mode and snap a picture. Slow motion is a great technique to incorporate into some of your B-roll footage. It can make products and things just look a little more epic. It can also help you make your shots last longer and be able to time perfectly in your timeline when you're editing. If you just take your normal footage at like 24 frames a second and try to slow it down to do slow motion, it's going to be much less smooth, especially the slower you try to make it. So this is a 6D Mark II, but also on my EOS R, they can only shoot up to 60 frames per second. Now this actually does change my exposure a little bit. It's gonna make things a little bit darker. So I'm gonna see if I can give you an example of this. If the only thing that I change is my frame rate, and then I film my B-roll footage and I put it into slow motion, sometimes you're gonna notice lights flickering, especially in my case, because like these blue lights, these accent lights, they're really cheap LEDs from Amazon. They're not like studio lights or film lights or anything. And so they flicker a lot, which means once you have your camera in 60 frames per second, turning your shutter speed up to 1/100th of a second will eliminate that flicker. So just remember, switching your frame rate means you probably also need to switch your shutter speed. Once I think that I am done using the slider and the tripod, sometimes I will use my gimbal. And so it might seem crazy to use a gimbal in a situation like this, but it can be a cool way to get some really cool shots, maybe a really fast push in or pull. I love using it for the somewhat cheesy but really fun 360-degree barrel roll shot. But however you're approaching your B-roll footage, the best thing you can do is have fun with it. And I'm a big believer that if you're having fun while you're making something, that totally translates to the finished product. So if you're enjoying what you're doing here, that sort of fun, that energy, that creativity is going to transfer over, and the people who watch your video are going to feel that, and that's going to keep them a lot more interested in what you're making. Of course, B-roll is just one small part of the entire production process, and I did put together a video that goes through how I make all of my videos from start to finish, so you can check that out if you want to learn more about that. And if you're interested in that slider that I'm using to make my B-roll footage, I did make an entire video all about that and why I think motorized sliders are a great addition to your gear setup.